Okay, hopefully I'm able to capture a lot of good material before the battery runs out again. All right, right now we're going to talk about data flow diagrams. And data flow diagrams form the core of what your research paper is at the end of this class. So you learned this skill today, and we might, if we don't get enough done, we might talk about it a little bit again on another day. But basically, this is it. And using this, this is going to be the bulk of what your project is. Now, as it relates to diagramming processes in organizations, there's a couple different types of diagrams that you can use. One of them is called an activity diagram, which we will talk about at a later date. And this particular one is called a data flow diagram. Now, you would use different diagrams for different purposes. Like any tool, there are certain tools that are better for some jobs than for others. A data flow diagram is one that allows you to see the passage of data through an organization. And maybe I'll contrast this with a particular type of process diagram that an operations professor might talk about. I co-teach an operations class with another professor, and when he's talking about manufacturing or producing a physical product, it has, his diagram has rectangles and triangles, and really it's just kind of showing the steps and the waiting periods, the holding spots on the way to finishing making some physical product. When we're talking about information systems, we're not, oftentimes that's not enough information for us. We live in a world of knowledge workers. So knowledge workers are accountants, loan processors. Most of the work probably done in society today, outside of manual labor work, most work today in the current era of modern times is done with knowledge workers. And we tend to be working with information and data that we take in, we change it in some way, it goes through a series of steps, and it goes back somewhere. Part of, for example, a restaurant buying experience is you supply information about what is your order, and they pass that order through an information system into the kitchen, and that information is used to then later on create reports that managers can view. So if you just ignore the food part for a minute, there is information that's flowing through an electronic system, and all that information needs to be captured and reported to the right entities accurately. And so, anyway, there are lots and lots of different types of processes in business today that require us to pass data around. So let's get to it and talk about data flow diagram examples. Data flow diagrams have just 4 symbols that you use. You can use either these symbols on the left, which are DeMarco and Jordan symbols, or the symbols on the right, Gain and Sarson symbols. It depends on which software package you use, which ones are available. So just pick one or the other and stick to it, and don't use something else. Only use these ones.
Which one uses Visio?
I think Visio is... That's a good question. Visio looks like a combination of both of these, I think.
Okay.
Probably a little bit, well, yeah, it looks like I think they say that they're using these ones, but then they end up looking a little bit like these. I'll show you where to use it in Visio.
Okay.
Okay. Definitions and symbols. We have processes, which are work or actions performed on data. We have data stores. So let me jump back up again. I guess you already saw that. So this is a process. This is some activity that you do on data typically. This is a data store. So it could be a filing cabinet. It could be a database. So it doesn't have to be, so data store here doesn't mean necessarily a technical product, particularly since we're diagramming before and after states of systems. So you'll go through and you'll analyze the system, and wherever they store a whole bunch of information, whether it's paper-based or electronically, can be represented with a symbol like this. A source or a sink, meaning the entities that supply information to the system and then ultimately get information back out of the system. Those are the sources in the sink. So an example would be a customer at the beginning of an order process and a manager as another part of that process that receives the report. But that all happens on the periphery. These only show up on the periphery of the diagramming that we're using. They don't show up on the inside of the diagrams. I'll show you in a minute. And then we have data flows. So the key parts are probably these arrows that have the data flows, and you put the name of the data on there, the name of the data flow, and the process. Those are the two key parts, and then these are kind of in addition to that. You can, oh, by the way, this set of slides that we're looking at is Chapter 7 from another system analysis and design book that we sometimes use at this university, but we're not using it this semester. So this slide deck is the only place that you're going to be able to get this information. You don't have, so you can read through it. You don't have to necessarily read all of it though. These are slide decks that summarize what's in this other book's chapter, so it doesn't contain all the information. At the end of this slide deck, there's some information about things that you don't need to cover or learn about right now. And at the beginning of it, there's some things that you can read, but focus on the part that I'm talking to you about that you're going to have to know. Okay, so there are a few different key types of diagrams that you use. The very first diagram that you make with data flow diagrams is called the context level diagram. It's an overview of the entire system. It's one process symbol without a data store. So here's an example of a context diagram. So you could pick out any process that's going on in a business that deals with data. It could be approving a loan. It could be checking out a car. Now, oftentimes it's a part of a system, not the entire system. Like we don't just put like ERP here. Usually we're analyzing a very limited subset of a process to fix. It would be impossible for your projects to take on an entire company or some organization like the FAA and say, I'm going to solve all of its problems. You just look at one thing, like the safety, the printed safety material ordering system, like the process that airports go about to order physical products from the organization that provides those safety paperwork, to them. That's sufficiently complicated enough of a system to study and map out. All right, so food ordering system. Again, in a context level diagram, there's just one top level system. There's not two, there's not many, one. And it's got the number 0 on it. And confusingly enough, even though it says 0, this is not a 0 level diagram, which is the next diagram that you'll learn about. But the context level diagram process is labeled with the 1. You have one name for the system. And as you analyze business problems, it's going to take you a little bit of creativity to figure out how to create this process level diagram. You got to figure out, this context level diagram. You got to figure out some word or phrase that represents the whole system. All right, so for this one, we see that we have a customer. This is an external entity. We have a kitchen staff representing an external entity. And we have a restaurant manager representing an external entity. This context level diagram implies that there's a bunch of stuff going on in here, but this diagram summarizes everything, and that it shows that going into the system goes a customer order as a piece of data. As a piece of data, a receipt is returned to a customer. The details of how that happens is obscured at this point. That as part of the customer order, the food order goes to the kitchen, and based on that data that's provided there, management reports are created and given to a restaurant manager. So the tricky part here is that you could interview somebody for potentially an hour, and they're going to give you, pages and pages worth of information about what they do as part of this process, and you got to be able to summarize it and go, oh, okay, despite all the details you told me about, these are the 4 pieces of data that are going into and out of the system at the highest level. And then now we're going to dig down into the details. All right, well, first off, let's do an exercise. I want you to practice this. So I'll hand out a stack of paper on this side and a stack of paper on this side. I've got 3 examples at the top, and I want you to practice trying to make a context level diagram.